Hello everybody, my name is Jonas Venlauf, and in this video tutorial here I'm going to show you how to adjust this image here to match up with the colors and tones of this image here on the right, so it will look like this when it's finished. To begin with, I put the sample image on a new layer right above all my changes, so I don't need to mask my changes to the other image. Now what I used here to correct the image or to unify the images was my supporting layers. So I have one set that is used to desaturate and darken the image. One set is used to extract the saturation of the images. And one set is used to extract the hue and make changes in the hue a little more obvious. We'll start adjusting the most obvious things first, and then we'll go more into detail as we progress. So first of all, I've unchecked the visibility of the adjust image group, which, adjusts the image. And now, as you can see, the background in this image is way darker than the background in this image. So what I'm going to do is just select the background of this image here, or select the foreground, doesn't matter. I just select the foreground roughly. And now to select the background, I'm just going to go to Select and then choose Inverse. Now I'm going to add a Curves adjustment layer, and now we can just lighten the background up a little, like I've done. With this image here. So you can see, it's just a pretty rough mask. I've added a little feather to it to make it a little softer, and lightened the background just slightly. Now, as you can see, the contrasts in the men and women are a little higher in the left image here, in the reference image. So what I did was create another adjustment layer to give it a little more contrast and darken it a little. And on this one, I just held down the Alt and Shift keys, dragged the mask over to the other mask, choose Replace Layer Mask, and this should invert the mask while copying it to the other layer. Next, I wanted to work with the saturation. For this, I'm going to disable the visibility of the luminosity group and go to the saturation group. Now what you can see, the white areas are areas of high saturation, dark areas are areas of no saturation. What I did first was give the overall image a little more saturation. As you can see here, the least saturated areas still have a little more saturation than in this image here. So what I did was just Command or Control click on the red channel, choose Select, Inverse, add a new adjustment layer, Curves, Hue and Saturation, I'm sorry, and just pump up the saturation a little, for example to +40. Set the mode to saturation as well. And because we don't want to saturate the two subjects even more, we're going to Control or Command click on the contrast adjustment layer mask and choose Control or Command and delete to fill this area with black, and therefore restrict the changes to the background. Now in this case I have up the saturation to plus 20 points. Next, I wanted to work on the overall saturation of the subject, and so I picked another hue and saturation layer with a selection of the channel. Once again, I loaded the contrast mask and used Ctrl-Delete on this mask to delete the subjects from these changes. Set the mode to color. And now what I did was bring the saturation down 40 points. So you can see that the dress is now a lot less saturated, which is a good thing because the highest saturation levels in this area, in this reference image, were nearly as high as in this image, so we had to bring this a little down. And I also adjusted the hue. As you can see here, the overall image here is pretty bluish, and so I had to adjust the hue as well. I guess I put it down to negative 165, negative 130 in this case. So we have a better feeling for the background, the color of the background. As you can see, we've already did quite a lot to this image. It looks quite a lot better. Now what we are going to do is decrease the saturation once again in the woman's dress because it was quite oversaturated still. And so what I did was just Control or Command click on the red channel, bring up a new hue and saturation adjustment layer, bring the saturation down to negative 40, mode is set to saturation, Alt click on the layer mask, just use levels, bring up the black slider to get just the dress and just the woman to select, and now desaturated, I'm sorry. So next thing was to unify the hue a little. For this I have just picked a nice color from this image here, added a new fill layer and filled the layer with it. Now I've set the mode to hue, and so we've unified the hue between these two images. To restrict these changes, I've put the opacity to 60%, and I've also copied my Lighten BG mask to this layer so we don't affect the subjects but just the background. Now for the next part, I have once again worked on the two subjects. I've copied the contrast mask on a hue and saturation adjustment layer and painted with black over the skin. In this hue and saturation adjustment layer, I've upped the hue to 165 points. As you can see, we now have a much closer match between the colors of the clothes in his suite. And I've also brought down the saturation once again to negative 60 points because the dresses in this image were not really saturated all that much, and so we had to bring the saturation a little down as well. Now as next step, I once again pick the color from this image here and use the new color, new fill layer in soft light mode to just enhance the overall tone of the image, lighten it a little, and overlay it with the color of our choice to bring it a little closer to this one here. Now the next part, and also the last part of this image, is that we, as you can see here, we have a lot of really dark and deep blacks, and so what I did was just Control or Command click on the RGB channel, use the inverse once again because we want to select the blacks, create a new curves adjustment layer, which I call darks. On this curves adjustment layer, I just alt-clicked on the layer mask to make it visible, and now used Command L to bring up levels once again, bring up the black slider, so we will just affect the very darkest parts of our images. And now I've just darkened these a little to make the darks match the reference image. So here's the before and after image. As you can see, it's really not all that hard. You just have to watch out for the sample image the whole time, try to mix and match, make the different parts come closer together, and what's most important, work on the most obvious things first. For example, in this image here we have lots and lots of backgrounds, so the most important part is to bring the background a little up. After that, work on the saturation, whatever comes to your eye at first. And so, with a little fine-tuning, you can get to this look without any effort. So I hope this helped. If you have any questions left, feel free to email me, jonas_wendorf@webton.de, or Skype me, JonasW234. Yeah. Hope you're having a good time. Goodbye.